Welcome to Self-Advocacy Matters, the podcast where we tell the stories of people who prove that one person, armed with determination, a wheelchair, and a refusal to take no for an answer, can change the world. Today's episode is about a man often called the father of the independent living movement. His name is Ed Roberts. He was a pioneer, a fighter, and a man who once told a rehab counselor who doubted him, I plan to be alive for a long time, and I plan to be a very busy man. And he was busy, starting movements, creating programs, making institutions rethink their entire approach to disability, basically doing more before lunch than some politicians do in a whole career. Looking at you, Congress. Ed's story has everything: defiance, creativity, a dash of rebellion, and the kind of determination that makes you wonder if he secretly ran on espresso. So, buckle up, or in Ed's case, maybe lock your wheelchair brakes, because we're rolling into history. Ed Roberts was born in 1939 in San Mateo, California. His childhood was ordinary until, at the age of 14, he contracted polio during the 1953 epidemic. Overnight, he went from being a healthy teenager to relying on an iron lung to breathe. Imagine that. One day you're worried about homework, the next your new roommate is a giant metal machine. Doctors told him he wouldn't live past a year. He proved them wrong by several decades. Note to doctors: maybe stop giving expiration dates to people who don't plan on expiring. He spent years in hospitals, sometimes only able to move two fingers and a few toes. But those two fingers became his power tools. With them, he learned to dial phones, write, drive a power wheelchair, and later change policy. The guy basically turned into MacGyver, minus the mullet. High school was rough. Teachers thought he couldn't finish because he couldn't do physical ed. He responded, fine, I'll do televised classes instead. And he did. He literally finished school by remote learning in the 1950s, decades before Zoom calls became the bane of our existence. When Ed applied to UC Berkeley, administrators hesitated. They were worried about liability, accessibility, and, let's be honest, having to rethink their entire system. A quadriplegic student living in a campus hospital ward wasn't what they had in mind. But Ed, he wasn't just applying to Berkeley, he was applying to history. By the time graduation came around, Ed's brakes weren't locked, metaphorically or literally. He had not only survived, but thrived, paving the way for something much bigger than just one college degree. Now, college wasn't just about academics for Ed, it was about community. In the hospital ward that doubled as a dormitory, Ed met with other disabled students. Together, they formed the Rolling Quads. Their motto could have been, unlock the brakes, we're moving. The Rolling Quads weren't your average student group. They were part support network, part activist squad, and part comedy troupe. If you think about it, the name alone tells you that they weren't hiding. They were rolling in, loud and proud. They fought for curb cuts, ramps, accessible restrooms, and most importantly, personal attendant services. Why? Because independence isn't just about having a degree, it's about being able to get out of bed in the morning without relying on a hospital. Their demands might sound obvious today, but back then they were revolutionary. Universities assumed students with severe disabilities simply couldn't live independently. The Rolling Quads laughed at that, then called a meeting with the chancellor. From their organizing came the first Center of Independent Living, CIL, in Berkeley. This wasn't charity, it was empowerment. Disabled people designing solutions for themselves, from wheelchair repair shops to advocacy offices. Imagine a cross between a student union and a Home Depot, but with way more civil disobedience. The model caught fire. Soon, independent living centers popped up in cities across the US and eventually around the globe. The rolling quads proved you don't need pity. You need power, voice, and a place to fix your wheels. Ed didn't stop with Berkeley. In 1976, California's Governor Jerry Brown appointed him director of the California Department of Rehabilitation, the same agency that once told him he was too disabled to work. That's like being rejected from a club and then coming back years later as its president. At the department, Ed flipped the script. Instead of telling people with disabilities as clients to be, or excuse me, instead of treating people with disabilities as clients to be fixed, he insisted they were consumers who knew their own needs best. Priorities shifted from paternalism to self-determination. Radical stuff at the time, though honestly, it's just common sense. Ed expanded services, fought for accessible transportation, and pushed back against the constant excuse that accessibility was too expensive. His unspoken rebuttal, so is ignoring millions of people. In 1983, Ed co founded the World Institute on Disability, one of the first international think tanks run by disabled people. This was big. Suddenly, the independent living model was being shared worldwide, from Europe to Asia to Latin America. He was showing the world that disability rights weren't just an American issue, they were a global one. He also influenced national policy. Ed's advocacy, combined with the work of allies like Judy Heumann and Justin Dart Jr., built momentum that eventually led to the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. Without Ed, the ADA might have rolled a lot slower. The wins were real. Government policies, yeah, those brakes needed unlocking too. And Ed was the one leaning hardest on them. Ed Roberts passed away in 1995 at just 56 years old, but his legacy, it's everywhere. Every curb cut you see, every ramp into a public building, every personal care attendant helping someone live in their own apartment instead of an institution, that's Ed's legacy in action. More than physical changes, though, Ed changed culture. He reframed disability from something shameful to something powerful. He showed that being disabled didn't mean living a lesser life. It meant living differently, creatively, and often with more resilience than most people ever imagined. And he made sure the solutions weren't built by bureaucrats, but by the people who lived the experience every day. Ed didn't just open doors, he made sure they had ramps and elevators and buttons you could push with a finger, a cane, or heck, even an elbow if that's your style. Ed Roberts didn't just open doors. He changed the question people asked about them. Instead of can they enter, the question became how do we design a building so everyone can move through it with dignity? That tiny change in wording turned into laws, centers, and a whole new way of thinking about independence. If there's one tidy piece of evidence of advice from Ed's life, it's this: fight the assumption that other people know what's best for you. Build the tools you need, teach others how to use them, and then hand the mic to people who actually live with the problems. That's how lasting change gets made. Part stubbornness, part paperwork, and a lot of good coffee. Thanks for listening to Self Advocacy Matters. If you like today's episode, tell a friend, give us a rating, or better yet, help someone advocate for something small this week. Change is often just one accessible decision away. I'm Scott. This has been Self Advocacy Matters. Stay loud, stay kind, and if you've got a ramp to recommend, send it our way. So remember, lock your brakes when you park, unlock them when you want to change history. You know, Ed always pushed boundaries. And speaking of pushing, just remember, don't forget to unlock your brakes before you do it. Otherwise, history isn't the only thing you'll be stuck in.